And the problem is that with respect to the 9 justices of the Supreme Court and those 9 individuals alone, there is no place in the law for any proper fact-finding to take place. These justices won't allow themselves to be subjected to honest fact-finding. We really need to fix the rules over there, and that's why this Supreme Court ethics effort that I'm engaged in is so important. They should not be on an island of their own creation where no fact-finding about what the truth is ever gets done.
Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has made a career out of trying to hold the Supreme Court accountable for their blatant corruption and the broken set of rules that create the conditions for their corruption to take hold.
We are trying to fix 3 really simple problems. One is fact-finding. Fact-finding ought not to be an issue in dispute. Every member of government in the United States who is subject to any kind of supervision or ethics requirement, which is everybody, has a process whereby the actual facts are found of what went wrong. Hell, even the President of the United States had to sit for a fact-finding interview about the documents in his garage. It's only 9 people in the entirety of the United States government who think that they have no obligation to do any fact-finding. And that's pretty dangerous, because fact-finding is a really basic elemental proposition of our American judicial process, and it applies everywhere. It makes no sense for the body ultimately responsible for policing proper judicial process in the United States to not allow itself to participate in that most elemental and fundamental task of there being actual fact-finding. The second is a principle so old it's in Latin, for Pete's sake. Nemo judex in sua causa. No one should judge their own case. That's pretty easy to understand. And yet we let these justices, alone in the United States, nobody else, get to be the judges of their own ethics. And obviously they have failed to measure up. And the third issue is transparency, disclosure. We know perfectly well that the justices have failed at their disclosure obligations, and they can't keep their stories straight about meeting their disclosure obligations. We just had Justice Thomas go back into his previous disclosures to correct them and tell the world and the Judicial Conference, which was reviewing this, that his failure to file was an accidental error. It was, quote, inadvertent. But earlier he'd said about the same gifts from the same billionaire, oh, those don't have to be reported. That was personal hospitality from a dear friend. Well, which is it? So the idea that you can trust a Supreme Court justice with no independent review, no fact-finding, each the judge in his own cause, to follow the rules, has been blown to smithereens by the conduct of the Supreme Court justices themselves.
It can't be said enough that we need more fighters like Whitehouse in Congress who actually want to work for the people and make our country better. Supreme Court ethics reform has, become one of the most dire political issues of our time. And we need elected officials like him to speak truth to power from inside the government and wield their political leverage to improve the government and, in turn, all of our lives.
The court has done its best to prevent the American people from fighting back through the democratic process. It's made it harder for ordinary people to vote, while making it easier for billionaires and deep-pocketed special interests to impose their will on the American people with unlimited amounts of dark money. How did we get here? A decades-long scheme led by creepy billionaires and backed by a deluge of dark money captured the court like some crooked 19th century railroad commission. This court capture operation was not cheap. The latest estimate put it at more than $580 million, and that's a minimum. That money flowed in from creepy billionaires, laundered through right-wing front groups like the Federalist Society and Judicial Crisis Network, where the donors, the real donors, could hide their identities behind the front groups doing their dirty work. This dark money funded full-scale campaigns to stack the Supreme Court with justices who would deliver for the billionaires. This has been a long and often lonely fight in the Senate. The big money right-wing apparatus has tried over and over to shut me up. I think I may have a record for hostile Wall Street Journal editorials. And may I tell the Wall Street Journal editorial board, thank you, that is a badge of honor.
White House has it out for the corrupt conservative justices and the dark money networks run by Republican Party mega donors and other wealthy conservatives wanting to secure their influence over our society that bankrolled their rise to arguably the most powerful position in government. Recently, White House has turned his focus to one MAGA justice in particular.
Yes, we drank beer. My friends and I, the boys and girls, yes, we drank beer. I liked beer, still like beer. We drank beer. Sometimes probably had too many beers, and sometimes other people had too many beers. We drank beer. We liked beer.
The White House has authorized the FBI to expand its limited background investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, giving the FBI the green light to interview anyone it deems necessary, as long as the review is wrapped up by the end of the week.
I think the FBI should interview anybody that they want within reason. But you have to say within reason. They should interview, but they should also be guided, and I'm being guided, by what the senators are looking for.
Back in 2018, Donald Trump's administration was supposed to give the FBI free rein to investigate claims of sexual misconduct against Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And almost exactly 4 years later, in 2022,
we wanted to make sure that the White House had all the information we have. So when the hundreds of calls started coming in, we gathered those up, reviewed them, and provided them to the White House.
Without investigation?
We reviewed them and then provided them to
You reviewed them for purposes of separating from tip line traffic, but did not further investigate the ones that related to Kavanaugh, correct?
Correct.
Is it also true that in that supplemental BI, the FBI took direction from the White House as to whom the FBI would question and even what questions the FBI could ask?
In a limited supplemental BI, we take direction from the requesting entity, which in this case was the White House, as to what follow-up they want.
So
and that's the direction we followed. That's the direction we've consistently followed throughout the decades, frankly. You asked specifically about who and what, like who we...
I said, is it true?
It is true as to the who, to the who. I'm not sure, as I sit here, whether it's also true as to the what questions, but it is true as to the who we interviewed.
This is like last call at the Factual Correction Saloon with respect to the Kavanaugh supplemental BI.
White House again tried to get answers from FBI Director Christopher Wray about the background investigation into Kavanaugh, leaving frustrated at the lack of transparency. Now, just weeks ago.
And the best that the court packers can come up with is, well, there's nothing new there, and, oh, the timing is so suspicious. Well, as to nothing new there, what's new is the White House had total control over every aspect of the investigation. The FBI had no ground rules whatsoever to follow regarding supplemental background investigations. The tip line was a complete sham with no tip ever investigated. And they were told specifically not to get corroborating evidence when the Republicans all then went and said, oh, but there's no corroboration. So if the Republicans knew all that, shame on them. And as to the timing, Trump blocked me for 2 years of absolute stonewalling.
This week's report found that the Trump White House exercised total control over the investigation, including preventing the FBI from following up on numerous leads and blocking interviews with key witnesses. The Trump administration also allegedly instructed the FBI not to use its tip line, instead forwarding tips that were intended for law enforcement directly to the White House.
So this was done under the rules for a supplemental background investigation, which both the White House and the Department of Justice and the FBI declined to inform the American people meant there are no rules. The White House makes every decision.
You know, it's not surprising that the Trump administration did this, but it's still very alarming and dangerous that they participated in a sham investigation into very serious claims about or against Brett Kavanaugh. We're talking about sexual misconduct claims, okay? And so when you take advantage and you abuse your power with this investigation over something very serious, regardless of political affiliation, that sets a terrible precedent. And it means a lot of people can get away with so many terrible things that are going to eventually, that have a lot of effect on other people, you know? So it's, to me, there's a bigger discussion here, right, about how crooked our politics are and how much money influences politics. It just incentivizes the corruption that we see.